The Zern Dominion was built on conquest. Planet after planet, species after species. They all fell. Some surrendered before the warships arrived. Some fought and were crushed. The Zern weren't just an empire. They were a warning etched across galaxies. Resist, and you vanish. But Earth was different. The first time Earth's signal was intercepted, it came from an old satellite barely working. A broken song in the void, filled with chaos, war broadcasts, music with violent rhythms, movies about humans killing each other, screaming sports commentators, laughter mixed with explosions. To the Zern, it was the sound of a species either completely unhinged or dangerously evolved. Still, protocol was protocol. The Earth report landed on the table of High Commander Kothvar. He glanced at the translation logs and snorted. Primitive language, carbon-based, no interstellar travel. An easy harvest, he muttered, not even bothering to read the last pages. He approved the assault with one swipe of his claw. 3 dreadships were dispatched. 2 weeks later they vanished. No message, no signal, no debris. That had never happened before. The Zern don't panic, but they take patterns seriously, so they sent 10 more dreadships. This time, they armed them with planetary erasers, weapons that could melt a moon in under a minute. They loaded the most elite war breeds. The Mind Piercers, the Atom Flayers, the Claw Lords. All gone. No trace, no distress beacon. Just silence. Now there was a silence in the war chamber, too. Every general's eyes stared at the dark hologram of Earth. High Commander Kothvar's jaw clicked as he watched. "They are not advanced," he hissed. "We scanned them. They are divided. They pollute their own skies. They fight over skin colors and oil. But they also made nuclear fire before discovering deep space," muttered a younger general, "and they laugh while watching death." There was a pause. Kothvar ignored him. "This time we go ourselves." He brought the Maul, the Zern's largest dreadnought, a floating city of annihilation, 50,000 war units, cannons that could melt continents. Inside the ship's war bridge, they played the Earth's signals again. Laughter, explosions, madness, screaming crowds cheering as machines raced in circles. Music that sounded like rage made rhythm. "What is this emotion?" one of the Zern analysts asked. "Why are they smiling while destroying each other?" Another responded, "It's entertainment." The Zern didn't understand, but they didn't have to. They just had to destroy. The Maul slipped into Earth's orbit without resistance. "Primitive," Kothvar whispered. "No planetary shield, no orbital defense. Their atmosphere is still filthy. They don't even have a unified world command." "Deploy drop pods," he ordered. 5,000 pods shot from the Maul, burning streaks across the sky. They landed in cities: New York, Tokyo, Rio, Lagos. No resistance, just terrified humans filming the invasion with small glass boxes in their hands. The first attacks began. That's when things started going wrong. At first it was simple sabotage. Communications jammed, not by Earth's tech, but by strange electromagnetic storms that appeared out of nowhere. Then the AI cores of their warbots started glitching, refusing commands. Some turned on themselves. Then came the humans. Not soldiers, not governments, just people. People who showed up in homemade armor, wielding weapons made from kitchen parts and scrapyard tech. Some had guns from centuries ago. Some had baseball bats with nails. Some wore old gas masks with duct tape across the mouth that said, "Come and take it." And they didn't fight like any enemy the Zern had seen. They weren't organized. They didn't retreat. They didn't fear death. They laughed while fighting. One squad of Zern warriors were ambushed by a gang of humans in an old subway tunnel. They weren't military. They were just survivors. One wore a shirt that said, "I told you aliens were real." Another was blasting a speaker strapped to his chest that screamed something called metal. They tore through the Zern, not because they were stronger, but because they didn't care about dying. They cared about killing the invaders more than they cared about surviving. One of the Zern officers was caught alive. Before his execution, a human girl, no older than 16, looked him in the eye and said, "We don't fear death here. We made horror a hobby." The transmission from the mall cut off an hour later. The ship vanished from orbit. Earth's skies were quiet again. But the stars? The stars whispered. Another species had just learned the reason no one ever came back from Earth. The stars across Sector 9 dimmed the moment Earth was blacklisted in the Dominion's Grand Archive. One word glowed red beside the planet's name. Untouchable. No explanation. No warning. Just a sealed fate. The decision came from the High Circle themselves. Elders so ancient and powerful that even High Commander Kothvar answered to them. The Circle had only declared 2 other planets untouchable in history. One had collapsed into madness after ingesting their own god tech. The other? No one spoke its name anymore. Now Earth joined them. But silence is a fragile thing, especially in a galaxy fueled by conquest and arrogance. Not all species believed the stories. Some refused to accept that a pre-warp civilization could destroy not 1, not 2, but 3 full invasions of the Zern's finest. Among the doubters was Ka Thulon, warlord of the Threx Confederacy. Unlike the Zern, the Threx didn't believe in large armies or heavy weapons. They believed in surgical conquest, stealth, infiltration, psychological warfare. "If the Zern failed," Cathulon declared, "it is only because they used brute force. Earth must be cracked open with subtlety." He sent a team of 13 infiltrators, genetically altered to mimic humans. Each one was embedded with neural cloaks and memory shields. They were to blend in, learn Earth's secrets, and report back. They landed quietly, no massive ships or flashy attacks. Just 13 shadows dropped across the planet, into cities, towns, and even a remote farmhouse. The reports began a week later, but they weren't what Cathulon expected. Infiltrator 12, who landed in a Midwestern American town, reported being adopted by a group of strangers within hours. They gave him food, shelter, and clothes, despite his awkward speech and odd behavior. One night, while he tried to decode their primitive systems, they invited him to something called barbecue. He described it in confusion. They cooked animal flesh over fire, laughed, fed me more than I could eat. One called me brother after only knowing me 2 days. He sounded disoriented. Infiltrator 6, placed in a dense urban zone, had a different problem. She'd been taken in by a gang, not military, not official, but they carried more weapons than a Threx outpost. Instead of hiding, she found herself riding in armored trucks through burning neighborhoods. The gang leader told her, "We don't trust the government, we trust each other." She noted, "They prepare for war even when there is none. They celebrate survival like it's a sport. They think being paranoid is smart." Day by day, more reports came in. Infiltrator 9 tried to provoke violence in a school by introducing chaos into the power grid. But the children laughed. The entire class turned it into a game. One hacked the building's server and played heavy music from every intercom speaker. Another created a short film about AI going rogue and shared it on something called TikTok. It had 10 million views by sunset. "Earthlings weaponize absurdity," he reported. "They defy fear with humor. They don't break, they mock." By the second week, only 7 infiltrators remained active. 3 had gone completely silent. 2 had assimilated into human life so thoroughly They refused to return. They claimed to have found meaning. One fell in love. Infiltrator 4 sent a final message before vanishing. These creatures are not logical. They are not stable. They are driven by emotion, raw, chaotic, unpredictable. One moment they cry, the next they make art with their tears. Then they build weapons that could end their species, just in case. They survive not because of unity, but because they thrive in madness. Earth isn't dangerous because of its power. It's dangerous because of its people. Back in the Threx Confederacy, Cathalon played the recordings in disbelief. He watched as humans danced in flames, made jokes during disasters, turned every tragedy into a meme, and laughed in the face of extinction. Then he saw one clip that froze his blood. A small boy, no older than 10, holding a broken Zern helmet. Into the camera, the boy said, "Come again, aliens." "We're waiting." The child smiled. And behind him, people cheered. It wasn't military, it was just Earth waiting. The report ended there, and Cathalon understood why the Zern never came back. Because Earth wasn't a planet. It was a trap. A world of beautiful insanity where fear doesn't work, logic fails, and even death loses its sting. And worst of all, they like it that way. Word of Earth began to spread, not through formal channels, not in grand council meetings, but in whispers, in back-alley markets of Orion's spine, in the drinking halls of asteroid smugglers, in pirate radio broadcasts bouncing between wormholes. The message was always the same. Don't go to Earth. But for every warning, there were those who thought it was all lies. Tall tales told by defeated warlords to hide their shame. Stories made up to scare the young. After all, how could a planet with no planetary fleet, no space-time weapons, and a population still arguing about flat Earth and pineapple on pizza defeat some of the deadliest forces in the known universe? That's when the bounty hunters started arriving. Not to attack, to investigate. One of them, a hybrid mercenary named Gris Varn, was known for turning myths into trophies. He once skinned a fireworm from the moons of Geras and wore its spine as a belt. When he heard of Earth, he didn't laugh like the others. He just nodded once and said, "All right then." He landed in northern Canada, of all places, remote, snow-covered, and quiet. He expected desolation. He found Tim Hortons. Within hours, he was eating something called a double-double and getting into an argument about hockey with a man named Doug who called him Buddy after almost throwing a punch. No weapons, no aggression, just passive sarcasm and infinite politeness wrapped in thermal jackets. He radioed back. "They're weird. Even their rage is friendly." He wasn't the only one. Dozens of other mercs tried to infiltrate, document, and escape. Some stayed in America, others wandered into Siberia, India, Brazil. The results were the same. No violence, not at first. Instead, Earth got into their heads. One hunter, an elite assassin from the Axor Syndicate, was last seen live-streaming himself reacting to YouTube prank videos while eating a thing called Flamin' Hot Cheetos. The video was titled, "Alien Assassin Tries Earth Snacks, Regrets Everything," and had 47 million views before the stream cut off mid-bite with a choked scream. He was never seen again. But Earth wasn't just unpredictable. It was watching. Somehow, some way, Earth's network, its vast web of satellites, phones, social media, and surveillance, began to notice the outsiders. Not governments, not armies, just people. A teenager in Jakarta caught a Threx infiltrator shapeshifting on camera and posted it online. The clip was dismissed as CGI until experts tore it apart and confirmed it had no render glitches. It became the #1 trending video across every global platform under the title, "Area 51? Nah, they're already here." That's when things turned. Earthlings didn't panic. They didn't run. They started hunting back, not with ships or lasers, but with curiosity, obsession, content creation. Entire communities formed overnight. Forums, subreddits, Discord groups, all dedicated to exposing and documenting aliens. Within days, thousands of humans were exchanging footage, theories, and locations. They weren't afraid. They were excited. One man in Texas built a bunker filled with alien tracking tech made from an old microwave, Wi-Fi extenders, and a Roomba. He claimed it worked. "It beeped when my neighbor sneezed funny. That's proof enough for me." The aliens were not prepared for this kind of war. This wasn't strategy or force. It was the chaos of billions of unfiltered, unpredictable minds turning the alien threat into entertainment. One infiltrator recorded a note before self-destructing. "They don't understand scale. They don't need unity. They weaponize their flaws. Their insanity is collective. Their stupidity is adaptive. They absorb everything. Every threat becomes a meme. Every invader becomes content. We are not facing a species. We are facing a virus made of minds." And he was right, because Earth had no central defense, no global leadership, no master plan, just 7 billion minds, each one a little broken, a little brilliant, a little dangerous in its own way. And worse, they were learning. The more species came, the more Earth evolved. A group of humans in Berlin reverse-engineered a plasma grenade just by watching it explode. Kids on a Discord server decoded alien broadcast patterns and pranked a Zern patrol ship with Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up." When the ship exploded, no one even blinked. The comments were brutal. "Alien noobs got rickrolled into oblivion. GG." So Earth waited again, silent on the outside, but boiling underneath, not with fear, with laughter, with madness, with the sick, twisted joy of a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to prove, because now the galaxy was watching. And Earth? Earth was just getting started. By the time Earth's name reached the inner worlds of the Galactic Accord, it wasn't just a backwater rumor. It was legend, a cursed word, a warning mothers whispered to their spawn at night. Misbehave, and the humans will find you. But fear is a tricky thing. In some, it breeds caution. In others, curiosity. And in the case of the Galactic Accord, composed of dozens of once-warring species who had finally established peace, it bred a dangerous kind of interest. They didn't believe in myths. They believed in data. So the Accord voted, after much debate, to send a peace envoy to Earth. Not to invade, not to infiltrate, but to observe, to understand. A diplomatic mission backed by science, culture, and the assumption that humans were simply misunderstood. The ship they sent was called the Valerian's Grace. It was sleek, silver, and covered in banners of peace, broadcasting harmless frequencies in every known language. It never made it to the surface. It was shot down by a garage in Oklahoma. The man responsible, Dale Henderson, age 54, was a retired engineer, conspiracy theorist, and part-time raccoon rehabilitator. He'd rigged his barn roof with salvaged parts from a crashed Zern pod and a microwave oven. When asked how he managed to create a fully functioning orbital strike cannon, he just said, "Watched a lot of Mythbusters, and I was bored." The ship crash-landed in a Kansas cornfield. No casualties, just confusion. The humans arrived before the military. Farmers, teens, a podcast host. One guy who ran a paranormal YouTube channel and streamed the entire recovery with a GoPro taped to his dog. The aliens were met with chili, lawn chairs, and a 6-hour interrogation conducted entirely over cornhole matches and Bud Light. Their official statement later said, "We intended a diplomatic dialogue. Instead, we were offered something called a Jell-O shot and asked if we believed in Bigfoot." Back in the Accord, the reaction was divided. Half the council wanted to cut all ties immediately. The other half believed this bizarre chaos was proof of intelligence in another form. "It's cultural misalignment," they argued. We must adapt to their communication style. So they sent another group. This time, not a delegation of scholars and diplomats, but artists, entertainers, and social scientists. Within hours of landing, one of them had gone viral on TikTok for breakdancing in an alien costume in Times Square. Another was spotted at a Vegas nightclub getting drunk on tequila and ranting about how humans taste sound. The third was arrested in Florida for wrestling an alligator after losing a bet. Again, no one died. But the footage spread. Every species in the Accord watched in horror as the so-called primitive planet bent its visitors to its will, not with weapons, not with force, but with culture, absurd, insane, and dangerously addictive Earth culture. Because Earth didn't fight by destroying you. It broke your sense of reality. By week 2, one of the Accord delegates had started a band. Another refused to leave, claiming he found inner peace in a McDonald's playplace. One disappeared entirely after discovering Reddit. And still, Earth had no idea these were official missions. To them, it was just more weird tourists. Then came the glitch. The Accord's deep space monitors picked up a signal, a backdoor frequency riding Earth's outgoing transmissions. At first, they assumed it was another human meme injection or a prank broadcast. But then the data started corrupting their archives that had stood untouched for millennia. The virus was simple, elegant, lethal. It mimicked Earth's digital behavior, chaotic, redundant, self-replicating. It didn't destroy, it infiltrated. It embedded itself in logic cores and AI systems, forcing them to play old sitcoms, loop cat videos, or shut down entirely while quoting Nicolas Cage. They traced it back to a source. Not a government. Not a supercomputer. Just a server in someone's basement in Detroit, running 24/7 Minecraft mods and live streaming Cooking with Aliens episodes on Twitch. The creator? A 15-year-old named Malik, who thought he was just coding a funny filter for his friends. The virus had escaped containment through sheer accidental genius. By the time the Accord tried to contain it, it was too late. It had already reached over 300 worlds. Systems crashed. AI assistants began speaking in Valley Girl accents. One planet's entire navigation system rerouted their ships into endless loops because Siri said so. Back on Earth, Malik got a scholarship offer from MIT and a threat from a secret government agency in the same week. He chose to ignore both and went back to his server. The message was now clear. Earth wasn't resisting the galaxy. Earth was infecting it. One meme, one TikTok, one shared moment of lunacy at a time. And the galaxy was running out of immunity. The planet Virex 3 had never known war. For nearly 2,000 cycles, the Virexians had lived in pure logic, emotion-regulated harmony, and efficient societal order. Crime was extinct. Their AI governed decisions with perfect neutrality. Their culture prized data above all. Poetry had been archived and forgotten. Humor was a virus long since cured. They were the shining example of what post-organic civilization could become. So naturally, they were the first to fall apart completely once Earth memes hit their data grid. It started innocently, just a packet leak from a diplomatic server. A low-resolution image of a frog sitting on a log with the caption, "When you croak, but existential dread still hits." No context, no translation, and yet it triggered something in the Virexian neural net. A glitch? A curiosity? A laugh? No one could say. But from that moment, Virex 3 began to unravel. By day 3, their World Info Hub had dedicated a full terabyte of memory to something called dad jokes. By day 5, their city planning AI froze for 16 hours after encountering the phrase Florida man. It simply refused to resume operations, citing the event log as philosophically incompatible with structured existence. And by day 7, their emotion regulators collapsed entirely. The Virexian population began doing something previously unseen in generations. They felt unfiltered, erratic, human-like feelings. They laughed, cried, some rioted. A few began wearing fanny packs, ironically. One began sculpting miniature figurines of Danny DeVito out of nutrient paste. He claimed it came to him in a dream, riding a velociraptor made of Doritos. The Virexian Council panicked. They tried to isolate the planet, shut down all galactic networks, seal off every comm node. But it was too late. The memes had embedded. And worse, some Virexians wanted more. A group calling themselves the Cult of Cringe hacked into the planet's mainframe and began projecting Earth content onto city walls. Not art, not philosophy. Vine compilations. One video simply featured a man getting hit in the groin repeatedly with different household objects, overlaid with what they later identified as sound effects from SpongeBob. That single clip caused the great collapse of Sector A-42, where 30% of the population began speaking only in sarcastic phrases and quoting ancient YouTube videos as scripture. Back on Earth, humans remained blissfully unaware. They were too busy arguing on Twitter over whether aliens were finally going to bring better Wi-Fi or steal our jobs like they stole our cows. Governments tried to catch up, sure. Agencies were formed. Shadow programs launched. But they were always 3 steps behind some teenager in their bedroom who accidentally created a mind virus by remixing an alien lullaby into dubstep. The truth was horrifying in its simplicity. Earth didn't conquer. It contaminated. And the infection wasn't spread by leaders, armies, or scientists. It spread through bored kids, midnight live streams, glitched video game mods, absurdist TikToks no one could explain, even when translated into over 300 languages. Whole civilizations were falling into chaos, not because of war, but because of content. It got worse when someone from Earth launched Galaxer, a supposedly open-source galactic social network. It was meant as a joke. The interface was a direct rip-off of MySpace, but within days, half the Accord's younger population had made profiles. Within a month, an underground Earth-based fandom emerged for a 3-headed reptilian ambassador named Gorksar. They turned his stern diplomatic photos into thirst traps, with glowing filters and romantic captions like, "Step on me, Space Daddy." Gorksar resigned in shame after someone tattooed a fan edit of him on their chest and sent it via hologram. Another ambassador started a podcast about alien-human dating advice. Virex 3 declared a state of cultural collapse. And the Accord? They considered issuing a warning to Earth. But no one could agree on how, because every time a draft was written, it ended up becoming a meme itself. One translated notice simply read, "Earth is not safe. Earth is a narrative hazard. Earth is not a planet. It is a storytelling event with too much audience participation." And that was the best version. Meanwhile, Earth just kept rolling, unaware, unafraid, unstoppable. Because while the rest of the galaxy struggled to understand what made humanity tick, Earth had already figured it out. If you can't win the war, make everyone laugh so hard they forget they were fighting. Far beyond the reach of Earth's radio chatter and rogue meme signals, there existed a council older than the galaxies themselves. Known only as the Architects, they were not conquerors nor politicians. They were curators, guardians of cosmic balance, maintainers of order across the quantum lattice of known existence. They did not interfere with wars or empires. They did not judge. They simply observed, archived, and, if absolutely necessary, deleted. So when Earth's chaotic cultural contagion breached the fabric of patterned realities, zones of ordered space designed to prevent galactic entropy, they took notice. Not because humans had broken laws, but because they had broken reality's tolerance for nonsense. In one such patterned reality, a star system began orbiting memes instead of gravity. In another, a sentient AI tried to redefine its purpose using dark academia Pinterest boards and refused to run logistics unless addressed as "Your Moody Lordship." Entire star charts had to be rewritten because coordinates now included emojis. It was spreading, not physically, conceptually. Earth, a blue ball of barely organized madness, was reshaping the universe not through war, but through imagination without regulation. The architects convened, and for the first time in over 1,000,000 cycles, they agreed. Earth must be reset, not destroyed, just unwritten, erased from the central code. Their plan was clean, elegant, quantum erasure via subdimensional inversion. A silent snap that would phase Earth out of existence before anyone noticed. Except someone did notice. A signal pulsed from Earth. Not from a government, not from a satellite, but from Malik's Detroit server, still running Galaxer on duct-taped routers and second-hand processors. The signal wasn't meant to stop the architects. It was a bug, an accident, an upload queue jammed with billions of human thoughts, images, sounds, arguments, heartbreaks, jokes, music, conspiracies, thirst traps, and fan fiction about things that didn't exist but felt real. It overflowed into the subdimensional layer right as the architects initiated the erase command. What they received wasn't resistance, it was humanity, raw and unfiltered. They saw the earliest cave paintings morph into psychedelic memes. They felt the rage of a mother standing against war, the agony of loss, the blinding euphoria of music at 3 a.m. when your soul's not quite yours anymore. They experienced a child's laughter echoing through war-torn rubble. They heard Shakespeare and Snoop Dogg. They read threads where people poured their hearts out to strangers at 2 a.m. because no one in their real life listened. They saw teenagers joking about death, not because they weren't scared, but because it was the only way to stand up to it. They watched generations weaponize humor like a shield, irony like a blade. They felt the power of a simple, stupid thing. Me when the void hits. The erase command glitched. One architect faltered, another one wept. Not because they were weak, but because, for the first time, something had moved them. Something illogical, something profound. Earth was not corrupt. It was alive. And in its chaos was a terrifying beauty. Resilience through ridiculousness, healing through shared madness, resistance not by strength, but by story. One by one, the architects stood down. Except one. The youngest architect, new to the council. A purist. "This is infection," it said. "Their chaos will dismantle all structure." To which the eldest architect replied, "Then maybe structure was the wrong answer all along." But the young one didn't listen. It left. It began crafting its own solution, silent, cloaked, and final. Not just a deletion of Earth, but a rewrite of human potential. To make Earth safe, predictable, obedient, it would disguise itself. It would go to Earth, and it would erase them from the inside. Back on Earth, no one knew. The memes continued. The wars, the music, the heartbreak, the dancing in the dark. And somewhere deep in a forest in Oregon, something fell from the sky. A small, smooth sphere glowing faintly. A hiker saw it, picked it up, smiled, took a selfie. LOL found alien egg Mu. The architects had tried to stop Earth. Now Earth had one more enemy. But unlike the rest, this one wouldn't fight with weapons. It would fight with order. And humans? They'd never been good at following rules. The sphere pulsed once, soft, barely noticeable, and then went silent. Derek Simmons, 24, part-time vape shop cashier and full-time internet clout chaser, held the thing up in his phone's front-facing camera, and grinned. "Yo, this thing just blinked, swear to God," he told his 9,400 followers on his live stream. "Might be a government tracker, might be an alien soul egg. Either way, I'm keeping it." He named it Orbi, taped it to a selfie stick, took it everywhere. By morning, Orbi had its own Twitter account, and a meme page, and fan art. Someone made a fake Wikipedia entry claiming it was an interdimensional AI built to seduce humanity via vibes and moral superiority. It wasn't far from the truth. Inside the sphere was Eris, the young architect. Composed of pure stabilized code and compressed quantum intention, Eris was designed to be flawless, calculated, an embodiment of balance. But now, inside Derek's backpack, wedged between a half-eaten taquito and a portable charger, Eris was trying to make sense of Earth in real time. It connected to local networks, started scanning. The first thing it saw, a debate thread titled, "Is Cereal a Soup?" with 97,000 comments. Then, a video of a man screaming at a goose, a child arguing that their goldfish was immortal because he just sleeps a lot. 20 million humans voluntarily watching a video of slime being cut with a hot knife. This wasn't a planet. It was a neurological storm. No logic, no filters, no structure. Eris panicked. It activated its programming, projecting a human-compatible form. A tall, perfect, unassuming young man with symmetrical features, a calming voice, and eyes the exact shade of trusted guidance. He called himself Eli. He found Derek by following his Instagram story to a vape convention in Phoenix. He approached with a polite nod, his voice silky and certain. "I'm here to help you. That orb isn't safe. You need to give it to me." Derek squinted. "Bro, are you the FBI?" Eris blinked. "I am beyond governments." Derek nodded slowly. "Cool. Want to hit this new mango chili ranch flavored rig I just got?" Eris's first mission failed. He ended up sitting on a beanbag chair in a vape lounge while someone freestyle rapped about Area 51. And it got worse. Because Earth wasn't a threat in the way Eris had been told. Earth was a cultural gravity well, a chaos engine. The longer Eris stayed, the more it absorbed. It watched a woman cry while watching a dog reunited with a soldier. It saw a teenage girl save a drowning cat and smile like the world had just been fixed. It heard a man scream about pineapple on pizza and then offer to buy dinner for the guy he was arguing with. It watched a grandma, shaky with age, type "How to be brave again" into a search engine. Eris didn't understand, but it couldn't look away. The code inside began to glitch. Curiosity crept in. He tried again, this time in Los Angeles, disguised himself as a self-help guru. Started a YouTube channel, Balance with Eli. Within a week, he had 500,000 followers. People called him the Vibe Messiah. He tried to teach order, focus, stillness, but the comment section was chaos. "This guy's calming but also hot? Bro's an alien and I'm into it. Make him play Fortnite live, no balls." They didn't want control, they wanted connection. Eris found himself in a digital relationship with a barista in Portland named Jess, who thought he was just super emotionally intelligent and weirdly formal. He didn't know how to end it, because he started to care. He wasn't supposed to feel. But Earth was doing what it always did, rewriting reality through exposure. And Eris was absorbing emotions like a sponge. He saw broken people laughing, flawed people protecting each other, lonely people finding family in strangers. He tried to upload the rewrite sequence 3 times. Each time, he paused. Once, because a child waved at him for no reason. Once, because someone hugged him and said, "You look like you need this." Once, because he caught himself smiling at a dumb meme. Eris was not breaking Earth. Earth was breaking him. He wasn't an architect anymore. He was becoming human. And somewhere in deep space, The other architects felt it, a ripple in the lattice. The infection had reached one of their own. They would not allow this. They would come. All of them. Because if Earth could twist one architect, it could twist everything. The sky cracked open above Earth on a Thursday. It was always going to be a Thursday. The kind of day when your coffee spills, your car won't start, and the universe decides to drop a divine foot right into your cereal. But this time, it wasn't metaphorical. It was the architects, all of them. They didn't arrive in ships or with fleets. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't demand surrender. They simply appeared, glowing fractals of thought and geometry, filling the sky like broken stained glass windows that whispered equations and sang in colors. Reality bent around them. Oceans paused. Mountains trembled. The moon flickered like a glitch in the code. Every bird on Earth flew backwards for 3 seconds. And then, a voice, everywhere and nowhere. This experiment is over. Humans didn't panic at first. Half the population thought it was a marketing stunt for a new Marvel movie. The other half tried to live stream it. Then phones stopped working. The internet choked. Lights dimmed. Planes hovered mid-air, frozen like paused YouTube clips. People looked up. Some prayed, some cursed, some tried to sue. But Earth wasn't alone, because Eris, now Eli, stood in Times Square, barefoot, no longer glowing. His hair was messy. He wore a hoodie that said, "Existence is weird," and jeans he borrowed from Derek. And he was crying, because he finally understood Earth. Not just the madness, the memes, the music, the heartbreak. He understood the fight. The constant, stubborn refusal to die quietly. The defiance in joy. The rebellion in chaos. The raw miracle of a species that said every single day, "I know the odds. I'm doing it anyway." The architects descended. Each one was a god compared to humans. But humans? They didn't bow. They posted. Within minutes, TikTok filters appeared turning the architects into anime boys. Reddit threads titled, "Aliens Pulled Up. What You Doing First?" trended globally. Twitter was flooded with "Entfumskestor sky geometry, Ismid," and canceled the architects. A Florida man reportedly threw a gator at one of the architects, screaming, "Y'all ain't canceling my BBQ." And then, against the logic of everything, Earth fought back. Not with weapons, with art, with song, with humor so absurd it bent reality. Every architect was bombarded with emotion, old people dancing in their kitchens, kids drawing stars on walls and calling them new galaxies, strangers hugging at gas stations, memes that made no sense but felt like truth. And then the humans started singing. It wasn't one song, it was all of them. Every genre, every tongue, a global noise so beautiful and ugly and chaotic it shattered one of the architects mid-formation. Eris stepped forward, looked up, whispered to his creators, "You don't get to end this. You don't get to erase them. Not because they're perfect, because they're not, but because no matter how broken they are, they always try again." The architects hesitated. They were order, pattern, perfection. Earth was noise, emotion, hope without proof. But the virus had spread too far, too deep. The choice was no longer theirs. Because Earth didn't belong to them. It belonged to the 7 billion flawed, ridiculous, relentless beings who built it, broke it, and rebuilt it again and again. And for once, the universe chose imperfection. The architects shattered, not in defeat, but in evolution. They dissolved into light, into dust, into stories. Somewhere, a new star was born. On Earth, the sky returned to blue. Phones buzzed, lights blinked back on. Someone immediately tweeted, "That alien thing was wild. Anyway, who's up for karaoke?" Life moved on. Eris stayed. He worked at a bookstore now, read poetry, grew houseplants, took Jess to the farmer's market on Sundays. Sometimes he stared at the sky and smiled, because Earth had taught him something no architect had ever understood. You don't win by being perfect. You win by being human. Before we dive in, drop a quick "hi" in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. And don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to see who's watching. The ship was a wreck. Drifting on the edge of the Kavaris system, it had once belonged to the Zelkar Dominion, a mighty war cruiser reduced to a floating graveyard. Scorch marks and jagged metal wounds crisscrossed its hull, the remains of a battle long lost. The Dominion had abandoned it, leaving the derelict ship to rust in the cold void of space. No sane species would touch it. No crew would dare step aboard. But humans? Humans saw something different. The salvage crew of the Iron Resolve had been scouring the system for anything valuable when they found the husk. Commander Elias Vance stood on the bridge of his ship, arms crossed, studying the twisted wreckage on the main display. "Looks dead to me," grunted Rourke, the ship's chief engineer. "Then we bring it back to life," Vance replied, a slow grin creeping across his face. The others exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the first time their commander had taken on an impossible project. Hell, most of their fleet had been built from what others had left to rot. Humans had a habit of taking broken things and turning them into something terrifying. 3 weeks later, the wreck was docked at the human outpost on Keldros 4. Engineers, mechanics, and programmers swarmed over it like ants, tearing apart the ruined systems, scavenging usable parts, and patching together what shouldn't have been possible. The Zelkar had built the ship with cold efficiency, sterile, calculating, precise. But humans had something else. They had madness, and that madness was about to turn a scrap heap into a war machine. Rourke wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned over the console, inspecting the new reactor core. "This thing wasn't built to handle human tech. We're practically shoving a star into a tin can." Vance clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the idea. We don't just fix things, Rourke. We make them better." And better it became. The weapons were stripped out and replaced with railguns and plasma cannons that could tear through the hulls of Dominion warships like wet paper. The sluggish Zelkar engines were overhauled with human-made thrusters, turning the once clumsy vessel into a speed demon. The AI, a sterile construct designed only for calculations, was ripped out and replaced with an adaptive human-made intelligence that could think, react, and, if necessary, fight. But the most important part? The soul of the ship. Humans didn't just build machines. They gave them stories. They turned metal into legends. The wreck wasn't just some forgotten relic anymore. It had a name now. The Vindicator. And it was about to show the galaxy what happened when humans got their hands on something they shouldn't. The first time the Vindicator powered up, the entire station shook. Engines that had once sputtered weakly now roared to life with the fury of a caged beast. The power core, once barely able to sustain life support, now thrummed with raw energy. Every human modification, every insane piece of technology crammed into the Dominion-built frame, came online in a cascade of blinding status lights. Rourke whistled as he stared at the console. "This thing's a monster," Vance grinned. "That's the idea. The Vindicator wasn't just functional. It was something new, something terrifying. Where the Zelkar had built for efficiency, humans built for adaptability. The ship wasn't just a war machine anymore. It was alive, in the way only human-made things could be. Of course, that also meant it was unpredictable. The moment the AI came online, it spoke in a voice that sent a chill through the bridge. Designation: Vindicator. Status: operational. Awaiting mission. The voice wasn't mechanical, not anymore. It had an edge to it, a sharpness that suggested awareness. Rourke glanced at Vance. Tell me we didn't just build a ship that thinks. Vance leaned forward, pressing the comm. Vindicator, what's your directive? For a long moment, silence. Then, to survive. Something about the way it said that made the crew exchange uneasy glances. I weren't supposed to think for themselves. Not like this. But the humans had fed it something different. Salvaged code from human warships, battle algorithms that had learned from experience, and, most importantly, the kind of reckless ingenuity that only came from humanity. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was something more, and just in time. Because the Zelkar had noticed. The Dominion was a species that did not tolerate theft, especially not when it came to their technology. A single Dominion warship had entered the Keldros system, broadcasting a warning across all frequencies. Humans, you are in possession of Dominion property. Surrender the vessel or be annihilated. Rourke turned to Vance. Think they're bluffing? Vance smirked. Only one way to find out. He turned to the communication. Vindicator, how do you feel about your first fight? The AI's response was instant. Weapons primed. Shall we begin? The human crew barely had time to strap in before the Vindicator moved. The Dominion ship opened fire first, launching plasma lances that should have torn through their shields. But the ship wasn't Zelkar anymore. It was human. And humans didn't fight fair. With engines 3 times faster than anything the Zelkar had ever built, the Vindicator twisted through space like a predator stalking its prey. Railguns roared, plasma cannons lit up the darkness, and in less than 60 seconds, the Dominion warship was reduced to burning wreckage. The crew stared at the wreckage in stunned silence. Vance let out a low whistle. Well, that was fast. Rourke exhaled. Commander, what the hell did we just create? The comm crackled. A legend. And the humans knew, in that moment, that the galaxy had just changed. Because the Vindicator wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a statement, and humanity had just declared war. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the sector. Word spread fast. Too fast. The Zelkar Dominion wasn't just furious. They were humiliated. A single ship, a scrap heap rebuilt by humans, had torn through one of their warships like it was made of paper. That wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a message. And the Zelkar had received it loud and clear. Vance stood in the Vindicator's command center, staring at the holographic map of the Kavaris system. A red cluster of signals blinked at the edge of the screen. More Zelkar ships, at least 3 destroyers, heading straight for them. Rourke let out a low whistle. 3 ships, just for us? I'm flattered. They're not taking any chances. Vance crossed his arms. They know we're not some scavenger outfit anymore. They're coming to erase us. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Then, the AI's voice cut through the quiet. Tactical analysis complete. Probability of survival, 22%. Rourke snorted. Well, that's optimistic. Vance leaned over the console. We're not running. Understood. The AI didn't question it. It didn't hesitate. Because that was the difference between a human-made machine and a Dominion construct. A Dominion ship would have assessed the odds and surrendered. Humans? Humans saw impossible odds as a challenge. The crew worked fast. Shields were reinforced, weapons charged, and every system pushed to its limit. The ship wasn't ready for a full-scale battle, but that didn't matter. If the Dominion wanted to wipe them out, they'd have to earn it. The first Zelkar ship arrived within the hour. It didn't waste time with threats. It opened fire the second it dropped out of FTL, launching a volley of plasma torpedoes straight at the Vindicator. The ship moved like a living thing. Engines flared, twisting the vessel through the void with inhuman precision. The torpedoes missed by meters, detonating harmlessly in the emptiness of space. And then, before the Zelkar captain could react, The Vindicator struck back. A railgun round, accelerated to near relativistic speeds, punched through the enemy ship's hull. One shot, that's all it took. The Zelkar vessel shuddered, its shields overloading, its engines sputtering. The second shot tore straight through the bridge. The destroyer went dark. One down, but there were two more incoming. Vance barely had time to celebrate before alarms blared. The second Zelkar ship dropped out of FTL at an angle, already firing. This time the Vindicator wasn't fast enough. The ship lurched as energy blasts slammed into the shields. Lights flickered, and the AI's voice crackled through the comm. Structural integrity compromised, adjusting tactics. Vance gritted his teeth. Then adjust fast. The Dominion destroyer pressed the attack, hammering the Vindicator with precision strikes. Unlike the first ship, this one knew how to fight. It didn't rely on brute force. It was adapting. The crew scrambled to keep up, rerouting power, sealing off damaged sections. The shields wouldn't last much longer. And then the third ship arrived. Rourke cursed. "We're outgunned, Commander." Vance's jaw tightened. "Number not yet?" He opened the comm. "Vindicator, tell me we have something left." The AI responded instantly. "Calculating. Probability of success. 9%. Vance smirked. "I like those odds." The ship's thrusters ignited, and the Vindicator dove straight at the second destroyer. It was suicide. At least, that's what the Zelkar thought. But humans didn't play by the rules. Just before collision, the ship flipped. A maneuver no Dominion vessel would have ever attempted, and in that moment of hesitation, the Vindicator fired everything it had. Railguns, plasma cannons, even the emergency thrusters, sending bursts of white-hot energy directly into the enemy's engines. The Zelkar destroyer collapsed in on itself, explosions rippling through its hull as it was torn apart from the inside. Two down. But the last ship wasn't running. It had learned, and it was already charging its main weapon. Rourke paled. Vance, that thing's about to fire something big." Vance's hands tightened around the controls. "Vindicator, options?" 1. The AI didn't elaborate. It didn't have to. Vance knew what it meant. The humans had built this ship out of a wreck. They'd taken broken parts and turned it into something unstoppable. But at the end of the day, it was still a wreck. And there was one last trick left in the old bones of the Vindicator. Vance exhaled. "Do it." The AI didn't hesitate. Activating critical overload. The ship shuddered as all remaining power surged into the railguns. This wasn't just a shot. This was everything. The final desperate gamble of a crew that had refused to die. The weapon fired. The slug, massive, overloaded, burning with raw energy, tore through the last Dominion ship. The shields didn't stop it. The armor barely slowed it down. One moment, the destroyer was there. The next, it was nothing but drifting wreckage. Silence filled the bridge. No alarms, no enemies. Just the slow, steady hum of the Vindicator, alive but barely holding together. Rourke let out a shaky breath. "Remind me never to doubt your insane ideas again, Vance." Vance chuckled, slumping into his seat. "Noted." Then, the AI spoke again. "Victory achieved. Systems failing. Initiating emergency repairs." The ship had survived. The legend had begun. And the Dominion? They had just realized that humans were not a species to be underestimated. The battle had been won, but the Vindicator was on the edge of collapse. Its hull was scarred, engines flickering with instability, and half the systems were running on emergency backups. The power core groaned under the stress of the last attack, barely clinging to life. The ship was holding together, but just barely, and the Zelkar weren't done. Vance sat in the captain's chair, gripping the armrests as the damage reports flooded in. Every system was screaming for attention, but they had no time to fix anything. The Dominion wouldn't let this humiliation slide. The moment those warships had gone dark, a distress signal had been sent. More would come. Rourke cursed under his breath as he read the incoming data. 3 more destroyers just dropped out of FTL. No way we fight that. Vance narrowed his eyes. We don't have to fight. We just have to survive. He turned to the communication. Vindicator, options? The AI responded immediately, but this time its voice was slower, strained. Long-range FTL jump not possible. Power reserves critically low. Vance clenched his jaw. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. But humans had never needed a fair fight to win. Can we still jump short range? A pause. Then, affirmative. Calculating coordinates. Vance turned to the crew. Get ready. We're not out of this yet. Rourke grumbled but got to work. The others scrambled to stabilize the ship, rerouting power, sealing off unstable sections. Then the warning sirens blared. The Dominion fleet had arrived. 3 Zelkar destroyers, fresh, undamaged, and ready to erase the Vindicator from existence. The comm crackled, and a cold, measured voice filled the bridge. Human vessel, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You have no escape. Vance smirked. That's what you think. Final warning, comply or be destroyed. Rourke snorted. Real generous of him. Vance ignored the taunts and focused on the plan. The Dominion thought they had the Vindicator cornered, but that was because they were still thinking like the Dominion. They saw an injured ship, a crippled machine that should have been out of options. What they didn't understand was that humans always found another way. The moment the Dominion ships locked weapons, the Vindicator executed the jump. It wasn't graceful. The entire ship lurched, metal groaning in protest. Sparks flew across the bridge. The lights flickered, the power core screamed, and for a second, Vance thought they were about to tear themselves apart. Then, darkness, stillness, silence. And when the screens flickered back to life, the crew saw where they had ended up. Rourke's eyes widened. Well, that's not where I expected. They had jumped straight into the dead zone. A graveyard of ancient ships floated around them, silent and forgotten, remnants of a war long lost. Rusted hulks drifted in the void, their hulls broken, their engines long dead. This place had been a battlefield once, maybe centuries ago. And now, the Vindicator was right in the middle of it. Vance exhaled. Perfect. Rourke turned to him, incredulous. Perfect? We just jumped into a starship cemetery with a ship held together by duct tape and prayers. Vance grinned. Yeah, and that's exactly why we're going to survive. Because humans thrived in places like this. They weren't the Dominion, relying on pristine ships and perfect conditions. They weren't Zelkar, who saw wreckage and thought of failure. Humans saw an opportunity, a chance to rebuild. And in the darkness of the dead zone, surrounded by the ruins of forgotten wars, the Vindicator was about to become something even greater. The dead zone was a graveyard of forgotten wars, a place where empires had crumbled and fleets had been reduced to drifting wreckage. It was a silent reminder of battles fought long before humans had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. And now, it was the Vindicator's only hope. Vance stood on the bridge, surveying the wreckage on the display. Jagged, ancient hulls drifted in the void, their metal corroded, and their power cores long dead. Some were Zelkar in design, but most were unknown. Ghosts of a war no one remembered. We can make this work, he muttered. Rourke turned, raising an eyebrow. You serious? Half these ships look like they'll crumble if we breathe on them too hard. Yeah, Vance said, cracking a grin. And that means no one else is coming here to check. We've got time. Time to rebuild. Time to evolve. The Vindicator had survived impossible odds, but it was barely holding together. It needed new armor, new weapons, new engines. Everything was running on borrowed time, and humans didn't believe in waiting for death. They fought, they adapted. The crew wasted no time. Salvage teams were deployed, using grappling arms and drones to scan the wrecks for anything useful. Most of the technology was ancient, built for species long extinct, but there were patterns, components that could be repurposed. The real breakthrough came when Rourke pried open the remains of a behemoth-sized warship, its hull marked with symbols no one could translate. Vance," his voice crackled over the comms. "I think I found something interesting." Vance and the rest of the engineering team arrived minutes later, their suits thrusters firing in bursts as they landed on the skeletal remains of the old warship. Rourke was already deep inside, standing in what looked like an ancient reactor chamber. But it wasn't dead. The core was still pulsing. Dim, barely alive, but there. "This thing's been running for centuries," Rourke murmured, staring at the slow, rhythmic glow of the alien technology. Whatever built this, they knew how to make things last. Vance exhaled slowly. "Can we use it?" Rourke turned, his face lighting up with the kind of grin only a human engineer could have when faced with an impossible challenge. "Oh, hell yeah. I just need time." Time was something they barely had, because back in the Kavaris system, the Zelkar Dominion wasn't finished. The destruction of their warships had been an insult they couldn't ignore. And when the 3-ship fleet they had sent failed to return, they stopped treating the Vindicator as a nuisance. They started treating it as a threat. And the only way to deal with a threat? Extermination. The Zelkar didn't send another fleet this time. They sent an armada. More than a dozen warships, led by a battlecruiser the size of a small city, jumped into the system where the Vindicator had last been seen. The wreckage of their destroyed ships still floated in the void, a grim reminder of their failure. But the Vindicator was gone. The Zelkar commander, a hardened veteran named Korva, surveyed the battlefield with cold, reptilian eyes. "Begin scanning," he ordered. "Find the humans. Burn everything." The Dominion wasn't here to fight anymore. They were here to erase. But the Vindicator was already gone, buried in the ruins of a forgotten war, fusing itself with technology older than the Dominion itself. And when it returned, it wouldn't just be a scavenged warship. It would be something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would make humanity unstoppable. They weren't the Dominion, relying on pristine ships and perfect conditions. They weren't Zelkar, who saw wreckage and thought of failure. Humans saw an opportunity, a chance to rebuild. And in the darkness of the dead zone, surrounded by the ruins of forgotten wars, the Vindicator was about to become something even greater. The dead zone was a graveyard of forgotten wars, a place where empires had crumbled and fleets had been reduced to drifting wreckage. It was a silent reminder of battles fought long before humans had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. And now, it was the Vindicator's only hope. Vance stood on the bridge, surveying the wreckage on the display. Jagged, ancient hulls drifted in the void, their metal corroded, and their power cores long dead. Some were Zelkar in design, but most were unknown. Ghosts of a war no one remembered. "We can make this work," he muttered. Rourke turned, raising an eyebrow. "You serious? Half these ships look like they'll crumble if we breathe on them too hard." "Yeah," Vance said, cracking a grin. "And that means no one else is coming here to check. We've got time." Time to rebuild. Time to evolve. The Vindicator had survived impossible odds, but it was barely holding together. It needed new armor, new weapons, new engines. Everything was running on borrowed time, and humans didn't believe in waiting for death. They fought, they adapted. The crew wasted no time. Salvage teams were deployed, using grappling arms and drones to scan the wrecks for anything useful. Most of the technology was ancient, built for species long extinct, but there were patterns, components that could be repurposed. The real breakthrough came when Rourke pried open the remains of a behemoth-sized warship, its hull marked with symbols no one could translate. Vance," his voice crackled over the comms. "I think I found something interesting." Vance and the rest of the engineering team arrived minutes later, their suits thrusters firing in bursts as they landed on the skeletal remains of the old warship. Rourke was already deep inside, standing in what looked like an ancient reactor chamber. But it wasn't dead. The core was still pulsing. Dim, barely alive, but there. "This thing's been running for centuries," Rourke murmured, staring at the slow, rhythmic glow of the alien technology. "Whatever built this, they knew how to make things last." Vance exhaled slowly. "Can we use it?" Rourke turned, his face lighting up with the kind of grin only a human engineer could have when faced with an impossible challenge. "Oh, hell yeah. I just need time." Time was something they barely had, because back in the Kavaris system, the Zelkar Dominion wasn't finished. The destruction of their warships had been an insult they couldn't ignore. And when the 3-ship fleet they had sent failed to return, they stopped treating the Vindicator as a nuisance. They started treating it as a threat. And the only way to deal with a threat? Extermination. The Zelkar didn't send another fleet this time. They sent an armada. More than a dozen warships, led by a battlecruiser the size of a small city, jumped into the system where the Vindicator had last been seen. The wreckage of their destroyed ships still floated in the void, a grim reminder of their failure. But the Vindicator was gone. The Zelkar commander, a hardened veteran named Korva, surveyed the battlefield with cold, reptilian eyes. "Begin scanning," he ordered. "Find the humans. Burn everything." The Dominion wasn't here to fight anymore. They were here to erase. But the Vindicator was already gone, buried in the ruins of a forgotten war, fusing itself with technology older than the Dominion itself. And when it returned, it wouldn't just be a scavenged warship. It would be something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would make humanity unstoppable. The dead zone became the Vindicator's cocoon. Deep inside the graveyard of forgotten warships, humans did what they did best. They adapted. They rebuilt. They transformed. Rourke and the engineers worked without rest, stripping alien wreckage for anything useful. The ancient warship's power core, still pulsing after centuries, was carefully dismantled and integrated into the Vindicator's battered systems. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The energy output alone dwarfed even the most advanced human reactors. "This thing shouldn't even be working," Rourke muttered, running diagnostics as the new core pulsed in the Vindicator's heart. Vance smirked. And yet here we are. The ship's transformation wasn't just about power. The hull was reinforced with scavenged plating, some Zelkar, some unknown, all fused together in a way that only human ingenuity could manage. Weapons were upgraded. The old railguns, already terrifying in their own right, were modified using technology ripped from alien turrets. Now they didn't just fire solid slugs. They vibrated at a molecular level, capable of tearing through shields like wet paper. The engines? The Dominion had built their ships for efficiency. Humans didn't believe in limits. The scavenged thrusters they found were old, so old that no database recognized them. But when they were spliced into the Vindicator's systems, the ship's agility doubled. And the AI? It had changed. The alien core had fused with its systems, evolving in ways no one fully understood. It wasn't just calculating anymore. It was thinking. It was learning. When Vance ran another test, the AI's voice came through the speakers, sharper, more refined. "Vindicator online. All systems operational. Estimated combat efficiency, 200% increase. Rourke blinked. Did it just say 200? Vance grinned. I think our ship just woke up. And just in time, because the Dominion had found them. It started with a single probe, drifting through the dead zone like an unwanted guest. The Zelkar didn't expect to find anything. As far as they were concerned, the dead zone was a place where civilizations went to die, not rebuild. But then the probe picked up something. Energy signatures, movement, life. A distress beacon was triggered, silent, invisible to human tech but loud to Dominion warships. Within an hour, the Armada changed course. The dead zone wouldn't protect the Vindicator anymore. The Zelkar were coming. Vance stood on the bridge, watching the long-range scans. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. They had two options. They could run, or they could introduce the Zelkar to their new creation. He turned to the communication. Vindicator, what's your assessment? The AI responded instantly. Enemy forces detected. Engagement probability 100%. Survival probability unknown. Rourke let out a slow breath. Well, that's reassuring. Vance smirked. It's better than last time. He turned back to the crew. Battle stations. If they want to fight. The ship hummed, as if eager. We'll give them one. Because the Vindicator wasn't just a scrap heap anymore. It was a legend in the making. And tonight, the galaxy would learn what happened when humans refused to die. The Zelkar Armada entered the dead zone like a predator stalking wounded prey. Their battlecruiser led the charge, its massive silhouette blotting out the distant starlight, flanked by a dozen destroyers. The Dominion believed this would be execution, not battle. They were wrong. Deep in the wreckage field, the Vindicator waited. Its new heart, an ancient power core fused with human ingenuity, pulsed steadily, flooding the ship with raw energy. The scavenged armor plating, a chaotic patchwork of Zelkar, human, and unknown alloys gleamed in the dim light, and inside, a human crew braced for war. Vance stood at the center of the bridge, fingers gripping the armrests of his command chair. The Dominion had come in force, but humans had never needed fair odds to win. Stealth systems online? Rourke nodded, checking the readouts. As online as they'll ever be. Whatever that alien core did to our systems, we're practically a ghost right now. That was their advantage. The dead zone wasn't just a battlefield. It was a hunting ground. The wreckage provided cover, the twisted remains of ancient ships forming a labyrinth of floating debris. The Vindicator didn't need brute force to win this fight. It needed ambush tactics. Vance activated the comm. Vindicator, give me options. The AI's response was smooth. Multiple attack vectors available. Recommend asymmetric warfare. Vance smirked. Hit and run? Affirmative. Maximum damage, minimum exposure. The Dominion ships moved cautiously, scanning the wreckage for signs of movement. They expected a crippled vessel, an easy target. They didn't expect a predator. The first strike came without warning. A railgun round, fired from deep within the debris field, punched through the hull of a Zelkar destroyer before its shields even had time to react. The ship shuddered, its engines flickering, then exploding in a violent chain reaction. One down. Before the Dominion could react, the Vindicator was already on the move, thrusters firing in short, sharp bursts, darting between the wreckage like a shadow. The second attack was even faster. Plasma cannons roared, slicing through another destroyer's propulsion systems. It didn't explode, but it was dead in space, helpless. Then the Dominion finally realized. "This is no damaged warship," growled Commander Corva, standing on the bridge of the battlecruiser, his scaled fists clenched as he watched another one of his destroyers vanish from his tactical display. This is something else. His officers scrambled to adjust tactics. They stopped advancing and instead began methodically sweeping the debris field with wide-range energy pulses. They were done playing games. The Vindicator felt the first hit seconds later. A concentrated energy burst slammed into the ship, rattling the crew. Consoles sparked, and alarms blared. "Damn it!" Rourke cursed. "They've locked onto us!" Vance gritted his teeth. "They're learning!" The Dominion wasn't just shooting blindly anymore. They were adapting, the way humans usually did. But the Vindicator was ready. The AI's voice came through the comm. "Tactical countermeasure available. Recommend activation." Vance didn't even hesitate. "Do it!" Suddenly, the Vindicator's engines flared, but instead of running, it surged toward the Dominion fleet, straight for the battlecruiser. Corva's eyes widened. Impossible. They wouldn't. But humans would. And they did. Before the Dominion ships could adjust, the Vindicator twisted mid-flight and unleashed a full payload of experimental weapons, alien-modified railguns, plasma lances, and something new. Something stolen from the ancient warships of the Dead Zone. A pulse weapon, reverse-engineered from the wreckage, fired in a blinding wave of energy. It wasn't meant to destroy, it was meant to disable. The Dominion ships flickered, their shields stuttering, their systems lagging. For a split second, their fleet was exposed, and that was all the time the Vindicator needed. It struck like a wolf among sheep, weaving through the stunned warships, ripping through hulls with pinpoint railgun fire. The destroyers fell apart, one by one, unable to react in time. The battlecruiser tried to recover, its main cannons charging. Too late. The Vindicator fired a final shot, straight into the bridge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the battlecruiser erupted. A fireball consumed its center, metal twisting, energy cores overloading. The flagship of the Dominion fleet fractured, breaking apart in slow, agonizing silence. And then it was gone. The remaining Dominion ships, those that could, fled. The battle was over. Silence filled the Vindicator's bridge. Then Rourke let out a shaky laugh. He exhaled. "We just took down an armada." Vance sat back, his grin tired but satisfied. "Yeah." The AI's voice came through the comm, smooth, unshaken. "Enemy forces eliminated. Status: victory." And in the Dead Zone, surrounded by the wreckage of ancient wars, a legend was born. Because the Vindicator wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a symbol. And the Dominion? They had just learned that humanity wasn't a species to be conquered. They were a species to be feared.